All right, welcome back to another episode of the Transatlantic Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm very excited today because I have a very special guest, Pierre Gaubil, who is the founder of 34 Elements. Is a bit of a superstar, I feel like, in the French startup world. Pierre, I see you everywhere on LinkedIn, and I know that you've got a lot of experience and a lot of things to share, which is why I'm really excited to get into this episode. A little bit about his company, 34 Elements. It's really where entrepreneurs, they learn to focus on what really moves the needle. He's going to help your team shift how you think, decide, and act. And his labs actually replaces that passive learning with live experimentation, strategic tension, and transformative clarity. And it's about learning. It's not about learning more. It's about thinking sharper. And that's one reason why, Pierre, I really like the work that you're doing, because I feel like people need more learning, like they need a hole in their head, meaning they really just need action and doing things and experimenting and trying it out. So I'm glad to see that you've got that approach as well. Pierre, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you, Christina. It's not because you're on LinkedIn that you're a superstar, by the way.
Well, I follow your posts on LinkedIn. I've got your book, which I do recommend. It exists in English and in French.
Yes.
I broke my own rule, which is usually I read books in their original language, but I said I want to read it in English for the podcast. But yeah, tell us a little bit first about how, you've got a lot of experience over there in Silicon Valley. You're from France. You live in France now, but you spent, what was it, 17 years in Silicon Valley?
17 years, yes.
How did you get over there in the first place?
By plane.
Okay, I guess that's probably easier than swimming and walking.
There we go. No. The only reason why we had a company that was a deep tech company at the time. And we realized extremely quickly that we had no market in France. I mean, there was a market, but it was too small and too complicated. And so our only chance to become global was to attack and conquer the US market. So early on, we built the company knowing that we had to go to the US at one point.
Right.
So once the product was, I would not say ready, but was reasonable.
Yeah.
Then I moved to the US and started the US operation.
Okay.
And that's where we found most of our customers.
Okay, right. So you guys were thinking US like almost from the beginning then?
Yes. From the very beginning, yes. We had basically no choice.
Right.
Which is, I would say it's a big issue in Europe. I think people think that their local markets are big enough, and they're not.
Yeah.
And they have two issues. They're too small, and they lack diversity. If you think of a good market, you have like tiny, small companies.
Yeah.
And you have average size companies, big companies, then very big companies, and then super large companies, right? And so as a startup, you learn from the small to the big, and that's how you grow.
Yeah.
If you're in France, what you see is like tiny, small companies and then enormous companies, because most of the economy is run by the state.
Yeah, right. Sure.
And so
exactly.
you end up dealing with like large corporations.
Yeah.
And as a small, tiny company, you're not geared towards working with large corporation. And so you miserably fail. And so what you do those POC crap all over the place.
Yeah.
You waste time and energy and money, and then you die. Where if you go into the US, the difference being is you have, average size companies that you can tackle up to the small, and then you have bigger one. And then the big guys, they know how to talk to small guys.
Yeah.
They're used to it, where here it's not the case.
Right.
So I think the market has two differences to me. One is the size, the tech market in the world, 40% of it is the US. That gives you a size. It's not related to the population.
Yeah.
US is 300 million out of 7 billion. That's a tiny place. But from a market perspective, it's 40% of the tech market in the world.
Yeah.
And secondly, as a startup, you can basically learn how to go through the ropes by going from small to medium to large to very large companies, which is not the case in Europe. So that is the reason why we knew we had to go to the US market.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's something that I've heard. I've had, my business here in France. I've been here for 20 years now. And that's something that I've heard repeatedly. They're like the small companies, they they work with small companies. The medium companies work with medium companies. So it's almost like you've got these levels. I don't want to say like a hierarchy, but it's not a hierarchy, but it's like, yeah, if you're at this level, you're going to work with this level, and if this level and this level, and you can do a little bit of cross level work, let's say. But like you said, I feel like in the US, it's going to be, it's more, people are just more used to working across those levels, and they know how to do that, which
And
means
you
if
need
you're
those
a
levels.
smaller tech company,
You need those levels. It's like in the
yeah,
ocean. You have like the big fish that
yeah,
eats the middle fish, and the middle fish eats the small fish, and the
mhm,
small fish eats whatever. So my take is you have to have that kind of diversity if you
right,
want to grow.
yeah.
You cannot go from like a tiny company to a super large company. That doesn't work.
Yeah, right. Or you explode and your
You do, yes.
culture and you hire way too many people way too fast and then it just all breaks and the founder has a burnout. So, yeah,
Yes.
right. So okay, so that's how you got over there. Do you think and like you touched on this, a little bit of a touchy question maybe, for a tech company who's here, let's say in France, we're both in France, um is it an obligation for do you think it's an obligation that they have to go into the US market in order to succeed?
Well, depends on what you call succeed, right? The
Mhm.
thing is, success is your success.
Yeah,
Your success might be to have like a solo company where you are super happy doing the
right.
work you do every day, or it could be like becoming the largest company in the world. So it
Yeah.
depends what success is for you. To me, success is if you have some privilege in what
Mhm.
you do, don't be mediocre. In other words,
Yeah,
go as far as you can go.
right.
So if you want to go as far as you can go, then you have to conquer as much market as you can. So
Mm,
you have to do, especially in tech, you have to be in the
right.
US. Think about how big of an influence the US tech industry is
Mm,
to the world, right?
yeah,
We live in like some troubled times nowadays with
sure.
Trump and co. And
Mm,
so if you were to say Trump stops the export of
right.
the US tech to the world,
Yeah,
we would stop. We would just not be able to perform.
right.
And so this tells you that eventually, if you want to become like a tech recognized
Mm,
company in the world, you have to first be a tech player in the US. There's
right.
no choice around it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, that's a really good way of putting it. I think that's very easy to like visual. Like if yeah, you said Trump pulled the plug. You said we're not exporting any more American tech, no more Google, no more LinkedIn, no more Zoom. All
We're
of that.
stopped. We're
It's like, oh my
done.
goodness, like how do we work?
I know.
Yeah, right. So
I
crazy.
know.
No. So what about so yeah, you've lived over there, you've built up a bunch of startups. You work with startups now with your 34 Elements lab. For you, what are the signs? I don't know if we can actually detect these, but do you see any signs of companies or founders when they're going over into the US that tell you these people are going to succeed, or on the contrary, these people, it's going to be a rough ride for them. They're going to probably fail.
But it's hard to say. It's like an investment. If an
Yeah.
investor tells you, I know exactly what I'm doing, he's lying. Right?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
So a startup a founder might be successful, might not be successful.
Mm.
There are two criterias that basically help you understand if you're going to be successful or not. It's a stat that comes from the US as well.
Okay.
One is timing. Are
Mm.
you in the right place at the right time?
Right.
Which is a really difficult question when you think about this.
Mm-hmm.
And as an investor, I would ask the founders, are you too early or are you too late? Because
Mm.
that we can gauge. But being in the right place in the right time is super difficult to understand. Instagram was typically in the right place in the right time. That's
Right.
why it became so successful,
Right.
despite themselves, I would say. So
Yeah.
timing is something absolutely crucial that we cannot control. And the
Mm.
second reason why you become successful is luck.
Yeah.
Okay. And so a founder that tells you, I am successful because I'm smart, he's missing the point. He's
Mm.
successful because he's lucky.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Just kind of
So
happens to be there at the right time and the planets aligned and
exactly. And suddenly something happens and
yeah.
boom, it changes the face of your startup. And
Right.
so luck is something you can look for.
Mm.
And you might be in a position to find more luck going to the US
Yeah.
and staying in your local place.
Sure.
So,
Right.
so I cannot tell you if a founder is going to be successful. I won't say
Yeah.
that. But I'm saying that if he goes into the US, chances are he puts, you know, some ingredients on the right
Yeah.
side to become successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's again, like I can't look at somebody and say these guys are going to succeed or they're not going to succeed. But perhaps it's more of a mindset and an attitude thing, and you see that they're willing to learn, to be open, to be challenged, um, to realize that maybe they've had their business in France for 20 years, but they're okay with saying, hey, this is like I'm starting over and I have to accept that. And being able, like you said, if they have an idea, but they see that it's not in the right place at the right time, they're willing to totally change their ideas. I mean, I had one company we worked with. They started out, they were doing like petroleum based products, and they wanted to go into like
Mm-hmm.
the petrol industry, and then COVID hit. And they pivoted and they went into like the cosmetics industry, which uses a lot of petroleum for their products. And they said, well, right now we're going to do cosmetics because it's not the right time for the products we originally wanted to do. And then they came back to their original products. But it's being able to, and it was a bunch of guys as well, which was quite funny that they were doing cosmetics. But the opportunity was there. So yeah.
I think to me, if you go to the US, you have to be really humble. I think one of the trick is you go to the US and you think you understand.
Yeah.
Because Americans are like us. They have the same kind of cars, and they eat the burgers, and they eat the stuff that we do here.
Yeah.
And so eventually, take away the language barrier. Eventually, people think, well, okay, I understand the thing. I know what that is.
Yeah.
And I think it's an enormous misjudgment in my mind.
Yeah.
In other words, we're closer to Japanese than we are to Americans.
Yeah, I agree.
And so my take is, when you go to the US, be very humble. In other words, you have done something in Europe. Good for you. You're successful.
Yeah.
What you have done cannot be replicated in the US. So you have to reconsider everything.
Right.
Starting with your product.
Yeah.
So you have to reconsider the product, your marketing, your business model, everything. And if you do not do that, then chances are you won't be successful. I've never seen a European company replicate what they did in Europe and the US and be successful ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in the same way, I don't think Americans can replicate their success the same way in Europe. You have to adapt. But the US is troubling because you think you understand right away, and you don't understand anything.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just curious, when you're working with founders, entrepreneurs, and they're looking towards the US, and you tell them these kinds of things, do they tell you like, no, it's good. I know the US. I've been there a couple of times. I lived there for 6 months. It's good. No worries.
Good luck.
Yeah,
I've lived there 17 years and I still don't understand all of it. So I always say good luck.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I hear that all the time. They're like, no, I lived in the US for 6 months. So, I'm good. I got it. I'm like,
it's a different league. It's a bigger market, much more competitive.
Yeah.
You have the best in the world over there. So it's a different scale. Everything is different. So you have to relearn everything. You have to de-learn and relearn, which is a very humbling process.
Oh yeah.
Especially when you are successful somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And what are speaking of like the differences and things like that, in your experience, what are some of the maybe the biggest the differences that present the biggest challenges or the difficulties for a French or a European founder who's going into let's say we'll do two cases here if we can. A company that is going to physically set up in the US. We'll talk about that first. And the second one is sort of the question of, is it possible to sell in the US without having a physical presence? But we'll start biggest challenges for someone who's going to actually set up their business over there.
Okay, I'm going to start with something like unusual. I'm going to say communication.
Okay.
And it's not about language.
Yeah.
It's about Americans are going to tell you things, and your interpretation of what they say is going to be wrong. Okay. The US is what we call a low context communication. So basically, they're very direct.
Right.
And they're not context sensitive.
Yeah.
All right. So it's simple and direct. French are high context communication. So basically, you have to read between the line. It's very sophisticated, And so for French, when Americans are very direct, it's super hard to read.
Right.
Americans are also extremely positive.
Yeah.
Okay, to a point
Yeah.
where for a French or a European, it makes no sense.
Right.
They're really positive because it's cultural.
Sure.
They believe that the size of the cake is growing.
Yeah.
And so basically, they look at business as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Your
Sure.
neighbor has a big car. They say, okay, why not me?
Yeah.
Right?
And
I'm going to work
what
hard
can I
enough
do to get that
to
big
get the
car?
goddamn car. This is what I
Yeah.
want. The French think the cake doesn't grow. So
Mm.
if you have a big car, it's my loss, right?
Mm.
I'm never going to have the big car.
That
So
guy has a bigger piece of cake than me, and now I'm
exactly.
jealous.
So it's driven by jealousy.
Yeah.
French are really jealous, right?
Mm.
And so it's very hard when you communicate because the positiveness
Yeah.
turns into something you don't understand. You go into a customer, you show the product, and they say, "Oh my god, it's great! I love it! It's really awesome."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Shit, I nailed it."
Yeah.
No, you nailed zero.
You're like, no, he's just kind of
They
saying
said,
like,
"Have a good day." That's basically the awesome means have a good day.
yeah.
Doesn't mean anything, right?
Right.
So
I agree. Yeah.
communication is really hard because they're really positive, they're low context, and there's also the way they say things is
Mm.
different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you are American, you're not um, basically going to tell people what you think
Right.
face to face.
Yeah.
You're going to say
It's
like
very frustrating, I think, for a lot of French people.
very frustrating.
Right.
You're going to say something positive,
Yeah.
and then you're going to say something that is a little bit negative, and
Yeah.
back to something. I love what you do, but I
But
love what you do. That's called the shit sandwich.
yeah. Right.
And then you have to look into the shit, not the sandwich. If
Exactly.
you don't, meaning you don't look at the shit sandwich, you cannot understand Americans.
Mm.
You're gonna always think that they're super positive.
Yeah.
A French, on the opposite, is going to be like telling you the thing right away.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite in a personal relationship, by the way.
Sure. Yeah.
Americans are very direct in their business relationship,
Right.
and very indirect in their personal relationship.
And the interpersonal interactions. Yeah. Right.
You know how we compare European to Americans?
Yeah. What's
It's
that?
the story of the peach and the coconut.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
peach,
Yeah.
you take a needle, that's the American. You go through the peach really easily, and then
Yeah.
you get to the kernel, and it's like, oh,
And it's kind of hard. Yeah.
kind of hard. Where coconut, it's really hard to go through, but once you're in, it's mellow and
It's kind of soft and juicy and nice. And yeah.
nice. And so it's hard to have friends in Europe, but once you have one, it's for real.
Yeah.
In the US, people are going to be very personal very quickly, but it doesn't mean jack.
Right. Yeah. It's like that's just how you communicate.
That's how you communicate. So if you don't understand that, then you're going to have a real hard time getting user feedback, client feedback, constructing a business in the US because you're going to read the wrong signals.
That's really interesting, especially what you said there, like the context of user feedback. Because I feel like if you took your product out there and you asked, you're doing a little bit of market research and testing, and you're going out and asking maybe some beta users and things like that to give you feedback on your product. Your American beta testers are going to be overly positive and enthusiastic, which is going to lead the founder to think, like you said, yes, I have nailed this. It's ready to go. It's going to be a success. They put it out in the market and then it's crickets. Yeah. So that is something you want to really be careful about. Yeah.
Negative feedback in France is explicit.
Yeah.
In the US, it's implicit.
Right.
And the opposite, positive feedback in France is implicit. In the US, it's explicit.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a different read. You read people very differently when you understand this.
Yeah. And that's something I had to learn. I think, like I said, I've been here for 20 years and now I know when somebody like starts talking about kind of criticizing something and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, all right, take it with a grain of salt. And then sometimes you have to dig in a little more intentionally to get, what was the positives? What did you appreciate, et cetera. And I feel like that's, if you're working with Americans and you do want that, what we call constructive criticism, you do kind of have to dig and tell them it's okay and it's very helpful. And I want you to, tell me everything that's wrong with it, because otherwise it's going to be a very uncomfortable conversation. Yes. But if they have that permission and everyone understands the context and the necessity of that negative or constructive, let's say, criticism, then you'll be able to get it. But you do have to really insist and kind of dig it out.
Another big difference to me is how people make decisions.
Okay. Yeah. That is a big one. Yeah. And I was talking with somebody just yesterday about this. So I'm curious to what you've seen.
In the US, done is more important than perfect.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you line up a decision really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
People align behind it.
Right.
They execute right away.
Yeah.
Failing is fine. If you're wrong, then we'll do something else.
Yeah.
The French way of making decision is very different.
Mm-hmm.
It's rational, and so there's a lot of debate. And what matters is to get it right.
Yeah.
Right? It's not to get it done; it's to get it right.
It's to
And
get it
so
right, and it
we
takes a
analyze
long
with this
time.
huge amount of process, and eventually we have an analysis paralysis, and we don't make any decisions.
Right. Yeah.
So what happens when you have a French guy into a U.S. meeting?
Mm-hmm.
The US guys are going to say, okay, guys, what about this, this, this? Okay, yeah, let's go. And then the French guy are going to raise their hand and say, by the way, did you think about this?
Right.
And everyone is going to look at them and say, no, we just aligned. We're good. Shut up. We're not.
Yeah. Let's just go and see what happens.
Let's go. If we're wrong, it's fine. We'll fix it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you have to go fast all the time.
Right.
You have to think sometime.
Sure.
But one of the reasons why Americans are better at tech than we are is because they're faster. They make decisions fast, and when they fail at the decision, they turn around and look for another way.
Exactly.
Where the French are way spending too much time on it.
Right.
And I think when you go into a meeting with a US people, you have to be aware that what matters is to align and move, not be right.
Right. It's just like let's just make a decision which way we're going, so we know that we're going that direction, and we'll see if the right thing is at the end of that path. And if it's not, that's okay. We'll just change paths. No worries,
If you play devil's advocate, you are going to be seen like a weirdo in the meeting.
You're going to be the what we call the Debbie Downer, the person that's always pointing out all the negative things. And yeah, I've seen this in my own work. I was working with a team headed by an American. One of the co-founders was French, and when we would have meetings like what you just described, I'm like, all right, here's what we've done. And the American's like, all right, that looks good. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, no worries. And then the French guy comes in. How did you get to this? What was your method? I mean, he said it's good, but tell me why. How did you? I'm like,
get out.
Yeah. I'm just let's just do it, and we'll see.
So if you don't understand the things we talked about, by the way, the communication, the decision-making process and everything else, it's really hard to communicate in a sense that you understand what they say, but you do not understand what they mean.
Right. So like you said, it's not a question of English, it's a question of interpretation.
Of cultural context. And without the cultural context, the Google Translate, then you are lost in the middle of the US without knowing what you're doing.
Right.
And so it's a really important element. You have to be humble about this and understand where you're setting foot. It's not France. It's not Europe. It's a really different place. I'm almost, whenever I go into, I feel like here in France, of course, we do get a lot of news and things that are happening in the US, because there's a lot of influence. But when I go over into the US, I mean, it's almost like France and it's in this parallel world. That we don't exist. We're too small.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you might see a little thing about Macron down at the bottom of the screen on the news or something, but other words, like you said, it's two very, very different worlds, very different histories, and very different ways of thinking and doing business. And going back to the question we mentioned earlier, do you think it's possible, or have you seen it in your experience? Can a tech company be successful in the U.S. market without a U.S. presence, like a physical presence?
Yes, the answer is yes. And it's new because it was not the case 10, 15 years ago. And I know a few that are actually successful.
Okay, yeah.
But then you have to think global. In other words, you have to speak English inside your company. You have to hire American people when you target the American market, although the American people can live where you are. But you have to change your culture a little bit. It cannot be a French culture cannot succeed in the US. A German culture cannot succeed in the US.
Right.
So if you have a global culture, you can work remotely and address the US market, but not for every product.
Right. Okay, yeah.
If you're selling like a customer heavy or like something expensive where customer support matters and so on and so forth, then they're going to want to see you locally, right? But if you're selling like a marketing, a little thing, then yes, why not? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, I feel like for a lot of people, what matters in the end in the U.S. market is like, does this thing do the job that I need it to be done?
Yes.
And the rest is details.
Yes, correct.
Mm,
Does it work? Can I use it? And then
yeah,
that's fine. And then
exactly.
is there enough support so I can use it? Basically, that's
Right.
the
Yeah,
support.
exactly.
Where does support come from? It's irrelevant. Now, if
Right.
it becomes strategic to the company, they're going to ask other types of questions.
Sure.
Where are you located? What's your, then it becomes a bit of a legal work with lawyers in the US, which are,
Yeah.
way too important in my mind on the business side.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think that that's a big difference as well. I think between
Huge,
France and
yes.
the US is, here in France, it's like if you call in the lawyer when all of your other options have been exhausted and you're unable to solve the problem yourself,
Correct.
in the US, it's almost like get the lawyers in now so that, from the beginning, so that you can save money and legal battles and huge costs because we have to figure this out in the end.
But
Mm.
it has a consequence on the relationships between people.
Okay. Yeah.
Because in the US, it's very lawyer centric.
Right.
In other words, I can lie to you to your face
Hmm.
until the lawyer ink down what we need to do together. Then I can just say whatever I want. My
Right.
word is irrelevant.
Sure.
In Europe, if I say something to you, it has a weight. In other words,
Mm.
people tend to believe that what you say is what you are.
Yeah.
And so it's not because we're gonna have some kind of a legal agreement behind it. You
Yeah.
said something, I trusted you, it matters.
Right.
In the US, it doesn't. I remember a story of Akio Morita, who was the CEO of Sony.
Yeah.
And RC at the time, a US company, was suing Sony for the Trinitron, which was a technology on the television.
Okay.
And Akio Morita called the CEO of RC and said, look,
Yeah.
we should stop this lawsuit. It makes no sense. I mean, it's our technology. You're not going to win. Why do you do that?
Mm.
And the guy responded, I know you are correct. It's not our technology, but if I stop suing you, my lawyer is going to sue me.
Right.
So it
Wow.
tells you that this I think the lawyers in the US have way too much power,
Yeah.
and it's a travesty of relationship in many ways. In
Mm.
other words, what matters is the outcome of the law and not what people the trust
Right.
in people.
Yeah.
The chasers of ambulances.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's the
Where you
reputation.
have
Yeah.
my son was in a situation where the car was stopped and there was a lady biking who didn't see him,
Okay. Yeah.
and she was scared, but the car was stopped. It
Right.
never touched her, and she fell. He stopped to help her.
Yeah.
Then she called someone, boom, lawyers and everything, and then it was just a complete crazy nightmare.
Like, yeah. What's
He
that?
was
Something
just
that probably
trying
would
to
have
help
been.
someone. He hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
It cost me $8,000
Right. No.
to get him out of this situation. And you look at those people and you
Yeah.
say, they are bad human beings. I mean, it
Right.
makes people look really bad, like they're trying to profit a young kid who did
Yeah.
nothing
Right.
just because there's some lawyer crap around that
Right.
can turn this into money.
Yeah.
And
And there's like an opportunity there to be
I think the
had.
lawyers are absolutely destroying the American spirit
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah. And I
I
feel
hate
like
them.
I mean, even when I was, growing up in the US, so this would be in the 90s and the 2000s and all of that. I mean, even back then, lawyers had that kind of bad reputation, ambulance chasers
And
and
they're
things like
super
that.
expensive. They're really expensive. It's
Mm.
crazy. Every time you say something, it's $2,000.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
no, it's a society based upon lawyers, and I think that's a really wrong way of being a society.
Of being a society. Yeah. Well, I feel like if you've got everything that you do and say, it's got to be like checked and, very on paper. And it can lead to, I guess, kind of like, you lose a little bit of that interpersonal relationship because then it just becomes like what's in the contract and what's in, which I feel
And
like
words
that's
matter.
something is
Words
really
matter.
important.
If you
Yeah,
say something, it matters, right?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. Which I feel like that's why maybe a difference in terms of marketing and things like that. I
Hmm.
mean, you see in the marketing in the US, everybody's number one, everybody's the best, everybody's the game changer, and all of this. You come and then you work with, French entrepreneurs going into the US, and I'm like, all right, you're going to say that you're the number one. And they're like, yeah, but we don't really have any proof that we're number one. So we can't really say it. And we're not the best. I mean, that's a very subjective question. And so also I feel like in terms of marketing and how, a company is promoting itself, French market versus American market is going to be very different as well. No?
I think it's not just about being number one. We had the number one breakfast in America in San Francisco. I don't even know how they know they're number one in
Right.
the
Yeah.
US. But anyway, my take is um, French are mostly engineers in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And so they say what they can do.
Yeah.
And they cannot say something that they have not accomplished. For them, it's a lie.
Mm.
In the US, they're not lying. Their communication is based upon their vision.
Right.
So when Elon Musk, we talked about this guy already,
Yeah.
he's not very popular right now, but
Right. Sure.
when he said, we're going to go to Mars, he's not lying.
Mm.
He hasn't gone to Mars. But his intentions are that he's going to go to Mars, and he's
Right.
building a company around this.
Right.
And potentially, eventually, one day he's going to go there, right?
Right.
So when he's selling, I'm building SpaceX to go to Mars, most engineers and friends would say that's a lie. He's not going to Mars.
Right. They would look
But
at
he's
it,
not selling. He's
yeah.
not selling the product. He's selling the vision.
The vision.
And so I would tell French guys, don't sell the product, sell the vision. It's more inspiring,
Right.
and it's not a lie.
Right.
You're trying to do that. You're
And
not
if you
lying
don't
about
do it, nobody's going to come back and said, you know what, 5 years ago, I have
Exactly.
a video of you saying you were going to do it and you haven't. You're a lie. Like, no, nobody's going, hey, you had this vision, you tried it, didn't work. Good for you.
But don't say you're number one if you're not.
Right.
That's different.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, and how can you verify that anyway? So, right. Yeah. And what about, what are some of the, I guess the practices, the attitudes, the beliefs that you've seen entrepreneurs have that have led to, it could be failure, but it could also just be big problems in the US?
That leads to failure?
Yeah. Things that you want to, they want to be careful of, they want to avoid.
I think it's going too fast. I would say this. 15 years ago, I would say American tech was so ahead of the curve.
Right.
It was just unbearable. And so as a French or a German or an English guy, you would go into the US and you would discover a new world. That is not the case anymore. I think French entrepreneur, German entrepreneurs are basically as good, even better than French or American entrepreneurs.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't think it's a knowledge gap. So I'm not concerned about the knowledge gap. We know how to build product. We know how to do marketing. Yeah. We know all that stuff. I mean, this is gone. This is like global now.
Right.
People know how to do that. Right.
Yeah.
What to me is the riskiest thing in the US is not to be humble. Again, it's like what you see it's not real. It's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
Right. And so the being humbled and being in a position to say, I'm going to de-learn, to relearn is the only way to be successful. What I tell some of the entrepreneurs for them to understand is to say, well, here's what you can do. Instead of moving to the US, which has all kinds of constraints, I recommend you go for 6 months. You, the CEO, not the sales guy, the CEO goes for 6 months. And then you open your ears and you listen and you look at the market, you talk to your competition, you talk to partners, you talk to clients, you talk to whatever. And you learn. Yeah. After 6 months, you come back to where you were from and you change what you have to change. It will take you a year to change what you have to change. Right. And then you go back with intention. Yeah. Right? That could be a good method. Okay. Now, if you say, I'm going to go and be successful there, then it will cost you tons of money to actually fix what you could fix in your local place for a lot cheaper.
Right. Yeah. So I think I feel like a lot of people, I mean, and I see this, people, they'll contact me and I'll be like, let's start working. And when are you looking to go into the US? And the guy tells me like, maybe like June. I'm like, it's March.
Do you have a passport?
First of all, right.
Do you have a visa?
I'm just like, June, like next year, maybe. And he's like, no, like 90 days. That should be good. I'm like, no. And I feel like, that's really good advice there is like, just go over there for like an extended period of time. So like 6 months as an observer, as someone who's there to ask almost like an investigator. You're there to do research and find out things and talk to people. And that's it.
And the other mistake is to
Yeah.
believe that it's going to be easier.
Mm,
People go to
mhm.
the US thinking, well, there's more customers,
Yeah.
there's more money, people are waiting for me.
And
Well,
people make decisions faster. I hear that one a lot
after
as
and all that,
well.
good news from you. Nobody cares about you.
Right.
Nobody cares. So you go to the US, you are nothing,
Right.
right? I always take the same thing so people can picture what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you live in um, Tanzania,
Hmm.
right, and you're an entrepreneur in Tanzania, and you come to France,
Yeah.
right? Well, this is exactly the same for the French going to the US.
Right. Where the French people be like, I'm
We are
not
the
sure where that
Tanzanians
is
in
on a
the US.
map,
So
right?
no one is waiting for us. No
Yeah,
one cares. And there
exactly.
will be like 10, 20, 100 companies doing better than we do.
Mm,
So the thing is, no one is waiting for you. No one wants to give you any kind of money. No one is going to open the door. It's going to
right.
be much harder. You're going to play in a different league, and you're
Mm,
going to have to basically, first of all, watch and learn
yeah.
before you can do anything.
Right. No, very interesting. I really like that metaphor of, yeah, like imagine an entrepreneur from Tanzania comes into France and says, "Hey, I'm the Tanzanian
I'm the guy.
marketing person or whatever."
There
People are
you
going to
go.
be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yes.
Do you think, because this is something that I've heard positive, I would say for and against going into the US market and kind of using this French touch as a selling point. What are your thoughts on that?
Complete BS.
Right.
No one cares.
Right.
You're good or you're bad. If you suck, you suck. If you're good, you succeed. That's it. You
Right.
can be French or Tanzanian or whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an irrelevant question.
Yeah.
Americans don't even know what that means, the French touch.
Right. Yeah.
So no
Yeah.
one
I feel
cares.
like it's a very French expression in English. Yeah.
That's a crazy expression. Do you have like a good product and a good team
Mm.
that can serve a purpose?
Yeah.
For me, if that's the case, then let's talk. If not, I don't care about who you are. I
Yeah.
really
Right.
don't care.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's it's a question that I hear this. Like I said, that this I had one guy and he said, no, I'm going to be like the French marketing guy, and I'm like, that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, ask him
Um,
what does that mean? Because
yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know. I don't think I understand what that means. By the way,
Right. No, yeah, I don't either. But I said, unless you're in like a sector, that France is known for
like
food.
beret, like a good beret, that would
If you're
work.
selling berets or wine or fine pastries and things like that, but tech, no, yeah. No, and what about, so how do you feel, today? Because I know a lot of, like we said, it's complicated with Trump and whatnot. But I feel like, and from talking to people over there on the ground, business is continuing. Things are happening. Investors are investing. Things are still moving. I don't know what's been your experience. What are you hearing? What are you seeing from people?
Well, people, I don't think people are concerned. I mean, usually entrepreneurs are not concerned about politics, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like the way we see it is like it's kind of a constraint that we have to deal with, but
Yeah.
that's it, right? And then let me do my stuff and I'm fine.
Right.
Now, what we're seeing is that politics is becoming more of a constraint.
Mm,
It's becoming a something that we need to watch. I
right.
think the geopolitics has completely shifted with Trump,
Yeah.
and now what was once a not super interesting market, meaning
Mm,
Europe, is
yeah.
now becoming an interesting market
Yeah.
because if things keep on going the way they're going,
Hmm.
uh, Europeans are not going to buy Americans.
Right.
Americans are not going to buy Europeans. I
Yeah.
mean, if your car is 25%, has 25% taxes on top of it, you're going to
Yeah.
buy something else because
Exactly.
it's going to be too expensive.
Yeah.
And and then in this case, having a European targeted strategy
Mm,
might be something to think about
right.
that we never thought about before.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think there's a shift that is quite significant.
Mm,
In tech, it's really hard to figure out because we're so dependent on
yeah.
US tech
Right.
that we don't have any kind of fallback situation or strategies
Mm,
to replace US tech.
right.
But eventually, we're going to have to think about this. We're going to have data center and
Hmm.
technology that are European made. Otherwise,
Right.
if Trump cuts off the connection,
Yeah.
then we're stuck in the mud. So the
Exactly.
point is, I think there's a little shift in terms of, okay, what should I be doing now,
Right.
given what's happening? We
Yeah.
don't know where that's going, but it's a tangible. There's some tangible signs that this is
Right.
not going in the right direction.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
like it because I thought being global was a sign of peace
Yeah.
for the world,
Yeah.
and trying to oppose nations is not going to go the right
It's
way.
not the right way of doing things, I would say. Yeah. No,
I mean,
yeah,
I would
I
say
agree.
Europe has been lazy for
Mm,
sure at
sure.
trying to defend itself, depending way too much on Americans, and they were
Sure.
paying way too much for that. Agreed on Trump with that,
Yeah.
and we need to basically, you know, be self-defending in a way.
Yeah.
We're not.
Exactly.
We're
Yeah.
depending on the
Exactly.
U.S., so that's a mistake.
Mm,
But that's not a reason. You have to go, step by step and let people do the things they have to do to be, where they need to be.
mm,
Not that drastic cut that he's doing now. So I don't
right.
know. It's not a good situation. It's
It,
not.
it, it's,
It
it's,
doesn't feel good.
yeah, exactly. I would say it's like you said, it's just kind of like every day you have to sort of keep up with, like you said, usually politics and entrepreneurship, they're kind of these two parallel worlds. It's for entrepreneurs, politics imposes some constraints they have to work with, but it's like we have to look at every day, what are the new constraints that we might have to be working with, and that just makes it kind of a little
Well,
uncertain, let's say.
if you sell wine to the U.S. now, what do you do? I mean, if you sell aluminum, if you sell the kind
Yeah.
of, this is like really impacting those people,
Yeah, yeah,
and
no, yeah, the tariffs. Oh,
they've done
totally.
nothing to
Yeah.
be impacted. It's like purely political.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now what about, because if it's like physical products like steel and wine and cars and things like that, I mean, very clearly there's the situation. Trump decides to put a tariff, the price goes up 25%. But for tech, it seems a little less black and white, let's say.
I don't think so. I think tech is sovereignty in many ways.
Mm,
The reason why we have a space launcher,
yeah.
Ariane,
Hmm.
is because when we had a military satellite that we
Yeah.
wanted to launch, we had to go to the US.
Hmm.
And so we went to NASA and we said, okay, we want to launch this thing. And NASA
Right.
said no.
Right. And so
And so we
then
realized, oh Lord, we have to do something.
we have to
And
build
we
our own.
built and we built our own launcher so we could launch our own military satellites,
Yeah.
right? So Ariane is tech, purely
Mm,
for me.
right. Yeah.
So tech is, especially now AI and so on,
Sure.
is critical. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know the story about the F-35, the fighters.
Yeah. Hmm.
Basically, what we're discovering now is that the US has put the buyers, namely Denmark,
Hmm.
Portugal, UK, and so on,
Yeah.
Norway, under pressure to buy those planes,
Right.
that they seem to be less advanced than what is being used in the US,
Mm.
and that they need to be updated
Yeah.
so they can follow the cycle of technology.
Right.
And if they're not updated, they could become obsolete in a
Right.
month.
Right.
So basically, if you buy US technology and the US doesn't want to provide the updates, you bought a piece of steel.
Exactly.
So that's a question. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's that's a big deal.
That's a real. I mean, it's because it almost feels like, and I yeah, heard about this as well. Like Denmark, which has bought, the fighter jets, and this is exaggerating a little bit, but it's almost like if ever, there was a war because of the U.S. wants to invade Greenland, the U.S. could almost just flip the switch, and the fighter jets that Denmark bought would no longer be efficient against
Exactly. It would
the
not
U.S.
be as efficient as the US same plane, right?
Exactly.
So that's kind of an issue.
That's a bit
So
of a problem
so
for.
that's it's just an example.
Mm,
And so I think and a fighter jet or a rocket launcher is tech to me,
right. Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
so tech has become critical to the future of a nation.
Mm,
And if there's no tech that we're building in Europe, we
right.
are going to become completely irrelevant.
Right. Yeah.
And so
Dependent
that's
on
the wake up
other
call.
nations,
The
and
wake up call
therefore,
is stop relying on US tech.
right.
That's the wake up call.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people got it, but if they did not, then we are going to become completely
Then we're
irrelevant.
going to have a problem,
And then
perhaps.
Trump can say you're the 51st state, and we will be.
And then that's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And then and then that's the end of your 5 weeks vacation. Because right.
Probably.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it is, it's like you said, I think Americans tend to be very positive about things. And I like to say, there are, and this is what I'm hearing from people who are over there. There are opportunities, but the politics as it is today does create constraints that did not exist. But it's also creating perhaps also opportunities, like you said, for European tech to say, hey, we can create our own things, like with the Ariane project, which is, a fabulous example of, French tech success, I feel like.
It was European tech success in this case.
European, yeah, exactly. So yeah, even better. A little bit of collaboration and things like that. Before we finish up, anything that, you would like to share with maybe like French entrepreneurs who are still looking to go and do business with Americans in terms of how to succeed, how to make sure that they maximize their chances of success working with Americans and doing business over there?
Well, the one thing I would say, I mean, we've said a few things, so just listen to what we said. But I would say I would add a little thing, which is if you decide you have to be in the US, you have to conquer the US market, then think your company that way. In other words, from the get-go, from the early stages, start being a global company. It's really hard when you're a local company to become global. The culture shift is so immense.
Right.
That it doesn't work. So, if you're small, then speak English. Hire people that are not French.
Right.
Have, remote offices in other places in the world. So be global, even though you're small. And if you think global, even you're small, it's going to make it easier for you to actually go to the US.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have the mentality of a global company.
Right.
So my take would be, don't try to think in sequence where I'm French and then I'm going to go to the US and think about it when I go to the US. No, if you want to go to the US, build a company now that is looking like something that can go to the US.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's very, very, very good words. And it's something I see a lot of, I say, oh, are you guys looking for the US? They say, we're too small right now. I'm like, what? It doesn't matter. You can be one person and you can still go over and succeed in the US. But yeah, so thinking globally from the start, if global is in your ambitions for the next years to come, right?
Exactly.
Okay, great. All right, Pierre, so we can find you over at just a quick little, do you want to pitch us your lab, the 34 Elements?
Well, the lab is basically, I took two topics. One is the one I call the compass, and the other one is called the switch. The compass is, I think, when you think about being an entrepreneur, you have all kinds of decisions you have to make. Sometimes you lack clarity.
Yeah.
And clarity doesn't come from reading a book or listening to people or having a coach come in or whatever you want.
Yeah.
It comes from doing a diagnostic.
Right.
Like, it's like basically, if you want to know what the next step is, you need to be aware of where you are.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to diagnose a startup. What's going well, what's not going so well, what's not going well at all, and so on. And what do you need to do? What do you need to prioritize?
Yeah.
So the compass is a way to help entrepreneurs do a real diagnostic. So they become completely aware and clear about what they need to do.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. The second one is the switch. In other words, the switch is completely sales oriented.
Okay.
I think people don't know how to sell anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, I hate the idea of we are here to serve our clients. No, we are not.
We're here to make money.
You're here to serve your company.
Right.
And as a consequence, you're going to have happy customers. But it's not the objective. Because if the objective is to serve clients, then give them a fucking huge discount.
Yeah. Do volunteer work,
Right? So the point is, we're here to serve. So we need to switch the way we think about selling. And so I build another method on how to think as a rep when you see customers.
Okay.
And we ask questions like, should I stay? That's the very first question I ask myself. Should I stay?
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's a very different perspective. So there's a compass, which is a way to diagnose where you are. It's a 10 big questions. It's a month long. And the switch is sell differently. That's only 2 weeks, only 5 topics in this one.
Okay.
That's what I do. My take is, I'm not a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm here to make people transform. I want to see changes.
Yeah.
I'm not into, I've done my job. It's good. They've learned something.
I've transmitted the information and now it's
because
up
you
to
learn
them.
something or you don't. I want them to change.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I agree. It's very, very much, we're very much, we're here to make you take action, basically, because that's the best way that you can learn. And yeah, I think we're pretty aligned on that approach to helping entrepreneurs
I guess
succeed.
that's very American.
Yeah, that's it. Throw it out as my coach says, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And then you make your decisions based on that. Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Pierre, if people want to find you, they can go over and check out 34, that's 34elements.com. Of course, they can look you up on LinkedIn, Pierre Gaubil, and we'll put the links to all of that in the notes for the episodes. Pierre, thank you very much
Thank you so much,
for
Christina.
the conversation. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing your insights. I'm going to do a little book plug for you. Startup Unlocked, the no nonsense method to fix what's holding you back, because the publishers wouldn't allow you to say the no BS method.
I know, which is crazy. The publisher is Amazon, so.
And I've seen covers with worse words on
I
the
know,
title.
me too. Are you kidding me? Of course. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
So anyway, it's a great book. It exists in French and in English. And thank you, Pierre. Have a great day, and I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Cheers.